Okay, and I think that means that we're on air. So I'm here with Lawrence Krauss, who is currently in Australia. Um, and good afternoon.
Good late afternoon. Late afternoon. Early evening.
So
Because it's winter here.
winter. And so just out of interest, how far
It's
south
amazing.
are
The
you?
Earth is round. You know, it makes that. It has that wonderful property that it's winter here and summer there. But sorry, go on.
For me, I have never seen the southern stars, not properly. It's the old conundrum of the fat man who can't see his toes. I've always wanted to get south of the equator, but it's just never
It,
happened.
it is on a, in, you know, it's amazing. On the rare clear night in the dark, it's amazing to see the sky. The Milky Way looks like a cloud. It's just amazing.
Actually, so I have also been, I've toured quite a lot in the west of America, and there's some pretty good skies there too.
Yeah, near. I live in Arizona, which has got great skies, except for where I live in Phoenix, which is a big city. So there's so much
Yes, you
light.
live in the only place in Arizona where there's
Where
light pollution.
Yeah, I was going to buy a telescope, and I moved out there, and then I realized that I'd have to drive a long way to be able to use it properly. So I haven't convinced myself I should.
But even at that, with the places in the desert, the sky is transparent, so you don't get as much light pollution because there's not as much in the atmosphere for it to reflect off of, yeah?
Yeah, but you still have to get outside the city. I mean, it's a city of 5 million people, so you've got to get out to
Yeah,
the desert. But
that's
yeah, maybe you've convinced me. Maybe the idea of just throwing it in a car and driving. Maybe I'll do it someday.
yeah. And that's the other real problem with telescopes is the bigger they get, the tougher they are to handle. And it just becomes a big exercise to move the things around.
They've got these great ones now, unlike when I was a kid, where every 2 seconds you'd have to move the darn thing to keep it up. And now, you can just computer controlled, and they slew to an object. I can't wait to. I've used them in an observatory, but yeah, it'd be great. I'd like to have one of those that we just set up, press a button, say I want to see Andromeda, boom. Anyway,
So I mean, so I've played with both the go-to scopes and the ones where you have to find the stuff.
yeah,
And there is something organic about knowing your way around the sky, especially trying to find things essentially on the velvet black. There are
yeah,
no
yeah,
pointers to where you want to go to.
yeah. I suppose it's that. Yeah, I know. I guess so. I like to take the easy route in that regard.
But I mean, the other
It's
thing that's
not, you
really
won't understand the analogy probably, but it reminds me when I used to play golf that their walking is much better because you don't lose the ball as much because if you're walking, you sort of keep track of where it is, and you drive those
yeah.
little carts. Anyway,
No. So you've got a movie coming out with Richard Dawkins at the moment, yeah, called The Unbelievers.
yeah, that is correct. It's coming. It's actually out in it yesterday on iTunes in England, Ireland, the United States, and Canada. It's been shown on television in a few European countries, and the DVD it will be sold from the United Kingdom. Will be sold the end of the month, so it's just beginning its rollout, and for the general public, we've obviously had showings. I was just in Prague at a festival, and we've had a few showings at various places, screenings. But now it's out on iTunes and Amazon and video on demand in many countries, and it's quite exciting because actually it just came out yesterday, and it's already well in the countries it's out in. It's the #1 documentary being sold. I was very excited, and #4 in all independent films, which is great. I want to try and I'm hoping that this can reach a broad audience, not just the people who know Richard and I are, but maybe people who've never heard these arguments, and that's the point of the movie in some sense. It's a
Yeah.
fun movie, and I really admire the filmmakers who made it, and I think it's fair to say that it's entertaining and humorous as well as having a message and fast-paced. It's not long, and it's got some just for an extra little bit. It's got some of your favorite, well, some people's favorite stars in it as well. Celebrities are in there besides Richard and me. People like
So
Woody
what
Allen.
other celebrities do you have in there?
We have Woody Allen and Ricky Gervais and Cameron Diaz and Ian McEwan, the writer, and Cormac McCarthy, the writer, and Werner Herzog, my friend who's a director. So there's lots of interesting people in it.
Cool. And so, just out of interest, what was when they were making this? Did they? What's it basically about, the film?
It's a rock and roll tour film about science. They
road film?
filmmakers had seen an event that both Richard and I were at, in fact, in Phoenix years ago, and they likened it to a rock concert. They found it the audience responded to that with that kind of enthusiasm, and so they've been talking about doing a movie for a while, and it turned out Richard and I were doing a tour of Australia, and I managed to raise the money within 3 weeks before the tour began, and within 3 weeks, 2 crews of 6 people were out in Australia following us around, and it follows us around Australia and England, London, Oxford, New York City, Washington, Phoenix, and it sort of follows us in front of the stage and behind the stage and on television programs as we talk about science and reason, and sort of shows, it's kind of like a rock and roll tour film. It shows what it's like to be us, I guess, and hopefully also get some message across.
So, yeah, you mentioned promoting science there. You were the advisor, the scientific policy advisor for Barack Obama in his first term, yeah?
Yeah, before, in the first election, I was one of he had a science policy team. I wasn't the advisor. He had a team of scientists. One of the reasons I knew he was a good candidate was that what a politician needs to do is not know everything, but know who to turn to.
Trust.
And he put together a remarkable group of people, and it was fun while it lasted. And I have nothing to do with the administration, however, and that's fine. I'm happier to be able to criticize from the outside than be on the inside. So, but it was very satisfying, I suppose, to be part of that effort to help, for the first time, someone be elected in a while who actually was on the real axis, who had some idea that maybe you should base your policies on empirical evidence and not belief or bias or ideology.
So, yeah, I mean, one of my friends wrote that apparently back in 1987, America had a plan to build a superconducting supercollider, which could have in principle found the Higgs boson about a decade ago for the measly price of $4 billion. Did someone drop the ball there, or?
A lot of people dropped the ball, but eventually it was killed but not for scientific reasons, for political ones. Ultimately, the Texas congressional delegation was being punished for a bad vote. But they claimed that the United States couldn't afford it, and it's kind of amazing when you think about it.
That's just crazy.
Yeah, I know, and that's, as I like to say, that was about the air conditioning bill in Iraq for a week during the war, probably. And but also it was claimed we couldn't afford it. And what's really stupid about it is that they built the biggest tunnel that humans have ever built. It was 60 miles around, 60 miles. The Large Hadron Collider is only about 26 kilometers, I guess, and so it's less than half of that. And so 62-mile long tunnel underground for this amazing machine, and then the Congress decided to kill the project, and so it cost about $2 billion, I think, to dig that tunnel and all the infrastructure. And then Congress said, well, okay, we want to make sure it's never used, so they spent another $1 billion or $2 billion to fill it in, and so we have for $3 billion.
The worst of both worlds, yeah?
Yeah, digging holes and filling them in, it's typical. Anyway, it's a shame, and we would have been where we are now in physics about almost 20 years ago if the United States had the courage to lead instead of not, and it's unfortunate.
So I mean, the way that I would look at it is there are about 300 million Americans, so to raise $1 billion is $3 per American. Yeah.
Too much. Too much if it hasn't got to do with weapons or something equally ridiculous. It was a real disappointment, and it really, unfortunately, you see, it also hurt a generation of scientists. There were over 250 scientists PhDs who were faculty members at various institutions who had left their faculty positions to move to to Waxahachie or to Dallas, Texas, to build this thing and
Yeah.
work on it. And when that machine was canceled, they all lost their jobs, and a generation of experts on accelerator technology was in some sense lost, and it was really
And you
unfortunate.
can't get them back. I mean, it's one of those things. It'll take 20 odd years to actually rebuild the knowledge base.
Yep, I agree.
So yeah, I mean, if you were to look at it as $1 billion is $3 per American, Hubble was about 2.5 billion. Curiosity was about 2 billion. So you could buy Curiosity and Hubble and still have change from a 20.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's and I mean, and the Hubble and Curiosity are, what's really ridiculous is it costs about $1 billion. It cost about $1 billion each space shuttle mission.
Yeah.
Cost about $1 billion. So, and they were not good for much of anything. And
which maybe brings us on to the International Space Station, which according to, looks like it's got a price tag of about 150 billion. Good way of spending the money, or
no, of course it wasn't worth it. The best thing you could, I've often said, the best thing you could do with the International Space Station is, if you wanted to do science with it, is to let it fall into the sea and see how big a wave it made.
Yeah. Well, and the one thing that always bugged me about it, $150 billion space station, and it took them years just to put a bloody time-lapse camera on it. In fact, I don't know if you've seen the time-lapses from the ISS, but they are absolutely fantastic in terms of just sort of visualizing the Earth like that. But the camera that they had on was like a $50. It's the sort of thing you could have done with a $50 webcam.
Well, there's the space station, and it stinks too. It's really not mad. I understand it's more like being in a $150 billion toilet. Anyway, all the major science societies in the United States argued against building it. It was a huge waste of money.
Yeah.
Huge waste of money.
So
now there's a good science experiment on it, but that doesn't justify it. So.
Well, I mean, this is the real problem: is what are you going to do with it? You've got somewhere where you can keep humans in low Earth orbit. But
what you learn from it is how to keep humans alive in low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was worth 150 billion.
And if you take a look at the science that they try to do on it, it's awfully contrived. Like we can maybe build crystals. It's like...
No, I know, it's incredibly contrived. So I know. Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Well, next subject.
Well, yeah. Then you take a look at the U.S. military budget, which is about $700 billion, which all of a sudden makes the ISS look cheap.
Well, it makes the ISS look cheap, but it demonstrates that any argument that this country couldn't afford the Supercollider was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just ridiculous. Anyway, it's now we're excited that the Large Hadron Collider has been built and some of the science is being done, and it's an exciting time for us.
Yeah. So, keep me on space for a moment. Life in our solar system. Do you think there is any, other than Earth, of course? If so, why and where?
Well,
where and why? Yeah.
Well, I would be very surprised if there wasn't life in the solar system, either extant or extinct. But one of the reasons is that it's probably our cousins, because no planet is an island. The material from Mars comes raining down on the Earth all the time. We find Martian meteorites in Antarctica all the time, and we've now learned that life forms, microbial life at least, can certainly survive that voyage. And therefore, if life evolved on one planet, it's likely to pollute the other. So if we discovered evidence for life on Mars of one sort or another, either life underneath the surface or fossilized life, the key question would be, is it our cousins? I mean, in fact, life could have evolved first on Mars for all we know. Unlikely, but it could have. And then in which case, if you want to see what a Martian looks like, you just look in the mirror. But I suspect that there are lots of places in the solar system where life could arise, or at least if it was transported from another place, it could potentially flourish. And so I'll be very excited to, obviously learn some things about Mars. And I'm still not optimistic that there'll be any fossilized evidence for life on Mars, but there might be. But then there's the oceans of Europa and Io. There's lots of possibilities. Now, life, this is microbial life. And it would be fascinating, of course, not... What's most fascinating would be is if it isn't our cousins. If it's our cousins, that's interesting. But what we really want to see is there a second genesis of life, and that would indicate if there was really two independent developments of life on Earth, or I mean life on the solar system, that would tell us that it's ubiquitous everywhere throughout the galaxy. And so that would really be great evidence that the universe is teeming with life. But so we'll see.
Yeah. Just so you think that if there is life, there is a reasonable chance that it's actually migrated from one planet to the other. I mean, because to me,
it's almost impossible to imagine it hasn't. Microbial life could eat.
I wouldn't. If there was life in one. Sorry.
I mean, we get rocks from Mars, and microbes could certainly survive in those rocks. And so we, no planet literally is an island. There's material being transported between them, and therefore it's not unlikely at all that such a. It would be surprising if it survived the voyage. Could it flourish, or would it die on the other planet? All these questions we don't know about.
I would be very surprised if, because life tends to evolve to an environment, and if you change that environment, it's usually fatal fairly quickly.
Well, yeah, but the reason evolution persists is that there's a distribution in a population, and so there are extremophiles among bacteria and among single-celled organisms and microbes, and that can exist in incredible environments: hot, dry, acidic, and then of course, as I say, there's a population, and even if 90% of them die off, if 5% of them can survive, then you find that that's by natural selection that you'll select out that component. So you never know. You never know. Anyway, the only way to find out is to look. Talking about it won't help. Well, talking about it is fun, but science is empirical, and we want to go look, and that's the key.
Oh. So you have any hopes for Curiosity?
Oh, well, we're learning new things all the time about Mars. I just love watching it, and I love the pictures that come from it.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. And as I say, you could send a rover to Mars. Curiosity was a little expensive, but the first two rovers, you could send either of them to Mars for the cost of making a movie about sending Bruce Willis to Mars. So I'd much rather have more rovers on Mars than have people on there, at least to do science. You can send a lot of rovers for the cost of
first two rovers was Spirit and Opportunity. I looked at the landing systems, and I thought there is not a chance in hell that all of that is going to work in a sequence. Yeah, the whole thing's got to be robotically controlled, and it's got to get the entry angle correct. It's got to inflate these bags. It's all got to happen in incredibly well-defined windows, and if it doesn't, there's just going to be a loud crunch on Mars. No?
And it worked.
And
I know it's amazing.
Down like that.
Well, even Curiosity. I mean, the new rovers that was even wilder, right? It had to land. It was just amazing. I was here in Australia. Actually, it was just amazing. Truly, it was, and it worked. It's amazing that it works, but of course, they work pretty hard to make sure it does, because they get one shot, and it's a lot of money and a lot of time.
Yes.
So
and you can see how it's not faked exuberance when it turns out that it all worked, because it's pretty binary. You might end up with a crater.
People have been working their lives. The people who are working on those things spend 10 or 20 years getting it ready.
Yeah.
It's they dedicate their lives or their professional careers, and it's tragic when of course they do crash, which happens every now and then. But anyway.
But I mean, everyone makes mistakes, and the number of calculations to go into these things is prodigious. And
well, you know that some of the, but some of them do crash. I mean, we've had ones the famous example where they use didn't use the right metric system, and it crashed. It's sad, although it's almost humorous, but it's sad.
Well, I mean, that's the amazing thing is the Saturn V launch vehicle, of which I've got a model of just behind me here.
Yeah.
All done in imperial, inches, feet, pounds per square foot, and it's
also, well, also just think of I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but well, the Apollo moon landings were done with a computer that's much less powerful than this.
Yeah.
And much slower. It had a memory, I think, of something like 300K or something like that. That had to be.
Sounds rich on kilobytes.
Yeah, kilobytes. But way back then, remember kilobytes?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just amazing to think that was able to get to the moon and back successfully 5 or 6 times. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And the first man on the moon didn't have a digital watch, which is.
Yeah.
Puts it kind of in perspective. But
well,
so if someone were to give you a ticket to the moon, would you go?
The moon, I'd go. I'd go to the moon because the moon you can do a round trip, but Mars the only sensible way is a one-way trip. I've written about that. That the only sensible way is a one-way trip, and there are lots of people who want to do it, and originally I said I would, but I don't think I would want to do the one-way trip anymore. I just got married, and I think I'm happier here.
Yeah, I mean, so there was this sort of grassroots attempt to get some mission going to Mars, where they were all going to do it via reality TV or something like that.
There were lots of ideas. There are lots of ideas, and there are lots of people who were planning it. Maybe, and the point is, human space travel is only for adventure. So it's fun and adventurous, but there's not much science to get out of it, given the cost. The science per dollar is so low that it's not. We're not well designed for space. I've said it many times before on the air, and I'll say it again. Yeah. We're at 75-kilogram bags of water. We're designed to live on Earth, and not designed, but we evolved to live on Earth, and so if you want to send things into space, humans are not a good thing to send into space. Yeah, and especially since most of the money is spent getting them back alive, and it seems with robots, as bad as it is when a rover crashes on Mars, it's just a rover.
Yeah, an expensive rover, but yeah, I mean fundamentally,
no one another one. Yeah, exactly. And as I say, you can send 1,000 rovers for the price of sending a human being. So I'd rather have the 1,000 rovers for the moment.
But I mean,
anyway, I think I should. It's probably getting to be close to dinner time here.
Okay.
We should probably wrap up if we can.
Okay. In which case, I will say many thanks for taking the time to talk to me, and it was great fun. And
good luck to you. And well, thank you very much and good luck. And I hope you get to see the Unbelievers where you are soon, and your listeners will too as well. I hope. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.